Alright, so here we are in Fruity Loops. These are the samples that I've recorded for you. So we're only going to use these three at the beginning, and I guess I should let you listen to them first. So these are the samples very quickly without any effects. So this is the original signal. So kick and a throat bass. Kind of kicking the throat bass was kind of more vibration bassy. I don't know, but it just sounds different. And a pretty normal D&B beat. So none of these I warmed up for. I just kind of spat them out pretty quick. They're kind of off tempo. They're not the best. And that's for a reason, so that you can hear that after I boost this, it's not going to make the bad go away, but it's going to sound a lot better. So with all the effects that I have applied here, so you can hear all the bass has come out of absolutely nowhere, and it has taken very amateurish sounding beatbox to something that's actually kind of palatable, not sounding like a super crazy professional, because obviously I'm not a super crazy professional beatboxer, and also this was done very quickly. But this is just some very basic things to bring a fairly weak, not bassy signal to a more full bassy signal that isn't clipping. So I'm going to show you how that's achieved here. Basically, I'll use I'll use that guy. So we have it running through. The signal goes from top to bottom, by the way. So it hits this EQ, this reverb, and then Maximus is a compressor, specifically a multi-band compressor, but bear with me. So an EQ stands for equalizer. This is your signal coming in. So you can see all the different frequencies lighting up. This is your low end. This is your high end. You can see specifically the values there. They're kind of small, I know. It's a shitty part of this thing. But you use your ears mostly for this, not the actual visual labels. So basically, this is your low. This is your high. We're going to take the low end. And boost it to a ridiculous degree till you start to hear. If you're wearing headphones, which you should be at this point, you can hear that the bass is starting to actually hit your ears a little bit. It doesn't sound like something's playing far away. It starts to sound in your ears. And that's from boosting anywhere between a little above 20 to almost up to 200. That's that beautiful section where you get your bass brought out. Because that doesn't sound super amazing, we're going to do it again on a second equalizer behind it. And that's going to take our signal from... I'm actually going to push it a little bit too far, so you'll actually see our signal's clipping, and you can see it right here also, which is bad, but we're going to remedy that in our compressor in a minute, so don't worry about that. So we're going to push our bass a little too far, but we're going to make sure that we do two things while we do this. One, we're going to do what's called a low cut. We don't want anything below 20, maybe 25. Speakers can't really replicate that. It's so low and it's hard to hear anyway. You don't hear it until you get into a loud ass club and you can feel it in your chest. So we don't need any of that. We don't want to muddy up the signal. So we're going to take that off by doing what's called a low cut. I'm not going to show you specifically because you're going to be using a different thing. But basically we cut off everything below, what do I have here? Everything below 23, 25. We're going to boost this up to about 200. That's what I did on both of these equalizers. You can see. 200, the reason why we're not boosting all the way up there, you can hear it stops being bass. It starts to be tinny and starts to be kind of muddy and not nice. That's where the niceness of the bass stops. So we're going to try to bring up our bass with some equalizers, being pretty overhanded here and going a little too far, but we're going to try not to touch our 200 too much because that's when it starts to sound weird. To taste also, you can bring up just for a little bit of clarity. You around 2K to about up to 10K, which is pretty high actually, maybe up to 7K, is where a lot of clarity in your signal comes from. So if it's sounding a little too bassy from all this boominess, you might want to boost that a tiny bit, but be fairly delicate. Now that we've gone a little too far with our equalization, we're going to squish it all with a compressor, and that's this guy. And I know he looks pretty complicated right now, but we're actually going to ignore pretty much all this, and we're just going to be dealing with this little bit and this fancy-looking fucking thing right here. So, with a compressor and the equalizers, it takes it from being clipping so you get that volume duck whenever your bass gets too loud. That's clipping. That's very not good. And we're going to turn on our beautiful compressor here. And you can see it sounds louder, but paradoxically, we're not clipping anymore. So I'm going to quickly explain how to do that here. So how this compressor works, the signal comes in, it actually splits it into three. It takes the low end, the mids, and the highs. And so you can treat them all a little bit separately. It gives you a little bit more control. And then they all go into something called a master, where they run through the compressor again. And what a compressor specifically is, that's how the signal split, but what the compressor is actually doing is squishing the signal. And how it works, while this is playing, actually, I'm going to switch up this beat just so your ears don't break from listening to the same thing for a long time. So how this compressor works, this line represents a signal coming in. So this basically means 1-to-1. The signal loudness coming in at every point will go out exactly the same. If I go up kind of north of this, it'll start making it louder. And it, like, ridiculously. And if I start to go a little south of this, it gets reduced a lot. Now, we don't want to go that extreme. We're going to manipulate this in a very smart way. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So, knowing how this curve here works and affects things, we don't want to go above 0 decibels, which is right here. That's where you start to get into clipping badness. So what we're going to do, the original line being right here, we're going to take this and drag it a tiny, tiny bit down. This is on my low end, by the way. We're going to take that, and we're going to drag it a tiny, tiny bit down, like less than 1 decibel. And we're actually going to push it over to the left here. What that's going to do, it's going to boost every signal below. Currently, I'm at below about 1 decibel. Everything is going to get whooped up right in volume. Instead of following this, it's going to go whoop. But then as soon as it hits there, it's not really going to keep going above there. It's all of a sudden going to cut off. So it's going to take a signal that was pretty wide, and it's going to squish it and expand it at the same time, which is kind of weird, but that's how it works. On our mids, sorry, before I move on to that, there's one more thing. This is called your pre-gain, and this is basically a volume knob before the signal hits this line. So this is how much you're juicing the signal into the compressor. Making this go up will make your signal go up this line more, which will actually hit your compression line easier. So if it's way down, you'll hear the bass. And actually, I'm going to use, this one has a lot of bass, I'll use this one instead. Yeah, it's gnarly. Oh, fuck yeah. Okay, yeah, so we'll use that. So with the pre-gain down, you can see our signal right here. It's not getting too loud. It's on the bass kick, it's hitting pretty loud, but as soon as we juice it, it really brings out that signal, but it doesn't let the kick go into clipping. So that squishes the signal and then boosts it all up really high. So now all of our bass that was in our original sound is just right up there. Now we're going to go to our mids, and we're not going to do the same sort of thing, but we are going to give a little bit of a boost. We don't want to juice this like crazy because a bunch of mids starts to sound really tinny. So we're actually going to kind of be pretty normal, leave this at about 0. But we're going to take this, kind of move it over here. So that's going to take everything that is below 0 decibels, and it's going to kind of boost it a little bit right here. But when it gets to about 11 decibels, it'll stop boosting it as much until it reaches 0. So you can kind of see it boosts a lot until we hit here at 11, and then it goes to 0, and it stops clipping. And that's just going to not really change our snare very much, because our snare just goes straight to 0. It's really loud. But all the nice that's in the actual bass, not the low part, but like the part, if you know what I mean, kind of gets brought out a little bit more. And then on our high end, we're not actually going to do very much. So the signal normally is here, and it goes up kind of a little loud, and I don't like that, so we're going to go a little below that. So basically everything that hits every really loud volume up till, 13 decibels is unaffected. But then anything that's louder than that, that'd be overly shrill, is getting tamed down a little bit. And the last thing that we're going to do, that I'm not going to explain to you whatsoever because it's complicated, is we're going to do stereo separation on our highs, and we're going to do only about maybe 25 to 30% on our mids. I'm not going to explain how that works. On our lows, we're going to make sure it's in mono, so we're going to merge it. Not even going to explain how that works, just make sure your bass is in mono. It might be a little different to do on compressors, depending on what one you have to use. Just use Google, how do I mono my bass, or how do I merge my bass, essentially. Just do that, don't ask why, it makes it sound better. And the final thing is this beautiful little guy right here that adds so much charm, and you'll hear it a lot on our drum and bass track. Oh, whoops, I still have my bass soloed. So you can hear in this guy, it sounds good. Well, you know, I'm not the best beatboxer. It sounds good for my beatbox. But there's space in between everything that is just kind of, you can hear me breathing or like, I don't know, little mouth movements or whatever. There's a lot of just space in between. And that's where something like a reverb is really helpful. And it's not going to be a big reverb, but you should hear the difference. So here's it without it again. And with it, So I'm going to toggle back and forth so you can hear it. So you can hear the difference. And this reverb, excuse me. This reverb is a very simple little free reverb that actually came with Fruity Loops. It's really, really, really small. You can hear that there's not actually much being added. It sounds like you're in a really tiny room, basically. And that's because you don't want to go crazy with reverb, even though it can sound really good. So if you just juice the reverb, like, yeah, sure, it does sound kind of cool, and it could have its place. But if you put that over your whole beatbox, you just don't hear you anymore. You just hear this washing wall of fucking reverb sound. And it might sound nice at first, but it's a very telltale sign of a beginner producer and someone who hasn't really learned very much yet, is to just kind of be like, oh man, reverb sounds great, and crank it. So just don't do that, and you'll be pretty good for the most part. Reverb isn't very complicated. I'm not going to explain what all these do, because use your ears and like you can hear what most of these do. Like, you just screw around with it until it sounds good. But in general, what you want to do is you want to use, the important part is you want to use a fairly short reverb. So the one that I liked was like 0.2, 0.3. And short reverbs also come from small rooms. So if you're, if you imagine you're in a church, a giant church, you're going to have a reverb that's closer to that. And you're going to want to put your room size up. And possibly your diffusion, I'm not going to get into that. But we want to make a little tiny reverb that's not going to muddy our signal up, so we're going to make our room size small. And we're going to put our delay, our decay fairly slow, fairly short. Jesus, I forgot how to speak all of a sudden there. So we're going to do a fairly short decay and just call it a day. Also, we're going to mix it really low, 5%. That's it. So don't go nuts. Really don't go crazy. That is one of the biggest tips from this. Don't go nuts with reverb. But in total, that's how I've made this sound good. Now, the final lesson is these two loops right here, where I'm intentionally using sounds that I'm not very good with. This one has a BMG snare in it, and I actually learned it within the last couple of months. I'm still working on it. It's really weak, and you'll hear that even though it's boosted. So the original signal, so you can hear that it's like a little kid clapping his hands together for that snare. It's so bad. And when all of a sudden I juice it, like, yeah, the kick is bigger, the bass is bigger, the hi-hat is nicer, but the BMG snare still sounds bad. So if you're hoping to learn any of this kind of editing to fix problems in your beatbox, like sounds that you haven't mastered yet or that are really inconsistent, this isn't going to do it for you. You can only boost up what is already there and cut out a little bit of what is already there. You can't just magically turn a knob that makes things sound good, unfortunately. And that's just kind of how it is. I'll show you another example. On my vocal bass, I haven't trained it very much. This is it with under the effects. So it's just not what I want it to be. It's really weak, and even though I boosted it the same amount as this signal, which sounds nice and full. This one just doesn't sound the same. And that's running through the same effects with the same microphone, recorded about 45 seconds from each other. So it's really, really, really going to bring out bad sounds when you start boosting things. If a sound doesn't sound refined, it will sound more unrefined because you're going to be boosting bad. And bad boosted is just louder bad. And no one wants louder bad. So work on your sounds, obviously. Keep beatboxing all the time. But for this side of it, what you guys should be doing, on top of your beatboxing all the time and you're practicing, record yourselves beatboxing and record yourselves practicing, whether it's on a microphone from a camera, if you have a microphone kicking around from almost any device. This is being recorded on a microphone that came from Guitar Hero. So Rock Band, sorry. So the Rock Band for Wii that you could sing into, it's a USB mic, and it's the one I've been using to record all these. It's not amazing. It's from a fucking video game. So you don't need amazing equipment. Just record yourself beatboxing a little bit. Get a digital audio workstation. There's free ones out there. There's very not free ones out there if you're one of them rich folk. But get something. Get your hands on something. Get a couple of effects, like an EQ, a compressor, a reverb. There's other things you can play with in here that can do absolutely crazy things. Filters are great. Limiters. Or actually, you don't need one if you have a compressor, sorry. You can really get nuts with all these things. They all do very different specific things, but you don't need them. The only things you really need is compression, EQ, a little bit of reverb, just to put it sound like you were in a certain space when you were recording it. And it'll make your stuff sound good. And that's pretty much it for what I did here. So this was pretty quick setup. I didn't spend a lot of time on very specifics and tailoring it. Like if I was, for some reason, to do a wildcard, even though I'm shit, you would want to be very much more specific with it. If you guys want to see something like that where I'm doing specific sounds and like bringing how I would equalize specific sounds, I suppose I could do that. If you guys want any tutorials on more specifics on equalizers, on compression, reverb, anything else, I can do that. I love all this digital audio stuff, and I also love beatboxing, so I'm hoping I can be there for you guys to try to bridge that gap for some of you guys. So your good skills when you put it on YouTube and you're doing shout outs, you're doing wildcards, you're doing whatever, they can sound top notch, and you can really contribute something to the beatbox community then and sound fucking awesome. That's all I want for you guys. But anyway, I'll stop rambling and wasting your time now I'm done teaching. Thank you very much for watching to this point. If you did get to this point, leave a comment down below. If you guys do have any questions about anything, I will really, really try to answer anything, or even make videos if you guys request them, because I'm always looking for more ideas. I want to start making a bunch of videos because this is super fun. But anyway, my beatboxers, you all stay healthy. You all stay happy. I love you all. And big ups to all. Hush!